Welcome back to the Apex Archives. Today we're taking a look at a variant of the AKM, the East German produced MPi-KM. Alright, so today we're going to be taking a look at the East German produced MPi-KM, which is a variant of the AKM Kalashnikov assault rifle. The MPi-KM was a specific East German model and was made because the Soviet Union decided all their satellite states should be adopting the same type of weapons materials. So each country had their own designation for basically the same firearm. MPi-KM is basically the AKM for the East Germans. MPi-KM stands for Machine Pistol Kalashnikov Modern, so MPi-KM is the MPi essentially takes over the A in the AKM. So it's a modernized version of the AK-47 with a stamped sheet metal receiver and some other modernization updates when they were modernizing these rifles in the late 60s. The East German MPi-KM is a very easily identifiable rifle because they feature this unique plastic furniture. It is a brown plastic, and this is commonly referred to as the pebble stock buttstock. You can see also on the upper handguard, and then the East Germans also had a unique pistol grip design as well. Now, some of the early MPi-KMs did have wood furniture before they kind of figured out their plastic buttstock. Essentially, the early MPi-KMs actually had a laminate wood stock set. So the wood stock sets are pretty hard to come by for the East German guns because they switched over to the plastic pretty quickly. And even some of the early guns that had all wood furniture still had either a plastic upper handguard or plastic pistol grip. Later MPi-KM variants can be identified because they will switch over from this wood lower handguard to a bakelite lower handguard. Now let's talk about some of the other identifiable features on the MPi-KM. One thing to note is on the left side of this rifle, I'll move the sling here, we can see on the left side of the trunnion there are the markings on this rifle showing the year and batch number that this was produced. You'll notice there are no clear indicators of the factory make on the MPi-KM. However, above the barrel pin there is a very light K3 marking. That's one of the key indicators we'll look for on the trunnion to designate it as a East German produced rifle. In addition, on top of the trunnion, actually underneath this top cover, there's another marking that we'll look for to kind of show us that's a East German produced rifle, and it is a diamond with a circle inside. Now the MPi-KM has a lot of the same types of parts as the AKM. You can see this one has a muzzle nut. Later variants had the slant brake, standard front sight block for AKM. The gas block was a milled gas block until later variants like they did with the AKM, and they ended up doing cast ones. Standard gas tube, rear sight block, and then ribbed top cover. This is a sheet metal top cover. Some of the earlier milled guns actually have I don't know if it's forged, it's not stamped sheet metal though, it's much heavier duty and much thicker. And then we've got the standard AKM style buttstock, but just with the plastic pebble grain furniture. In addition, on the right side of the receiver here, you can see unique selector markings that were unique to the East German rifles. We've got a D and an E here, pretty standard for the 7.62x39 guns. Later, they kind of changed it up for the 5.45 guns. Now, one interesting fact about the MPi-KM is this was a very popular model for other countries to purchase from East Germany. These rifles saw service all over the world, and that's because the Germans still took a lot of pride in their manufacturing process despite being under the boot of communism. So a lot of other countries, you'll notice that they're kind of manufacturing and quality go down over time as the wonderful utopia of communism actually revealed its ugly head, and then the parts suffered as a result. However, the Germans kind of had a lot of pride in their manufacturing and still do to this day, and that's reflected in these East German rifles. Now, you'll notice that some of them do get a little bit lesser quality later on in their years of life, but some of the early guns like this 1969 one have immaculate finish and quality of manufacture. Now, one interesting note is when they switched over to the AK-74, the East Germans actually came up with their own variant of the AK-74. However, the Russians had a stipulation, and that was they couldn't make those for export, which kind of bummed the East Germans out because a lot of people were buying their rifles, but the Russians said, quit doing that. People are starting to go to you to buy their rifles instead of us, and we can't have that. So the later variants, the AK-74, that was made out of East Germany. There's not very many of them, and that's the reason why, is because they were only produced domestically for their own armed forces. They weren't made for other countries who wanted to buy them. The field strip on the MPi-KM is exactly the same as you might expect on any other AKM variant. First, we'll take the magazine out, bring down the safety, make sure it's clear, and then it's a standard strip. Just like you would do any other AK, you can push this rear button forward and take off the top cover. Then you can push the button forward and bring out the recoil spring. You can then remove the bolt and carrier, and then throw this gas tube retaining lever to the upright position and take out the gas tube. The last step is to simply pull up and remove the cleaning rod from the rifle. To reassemble the rifle, you simply follow all of the steps I just showed you in reverse order. So we'll put the cleaning rod back in, set the gas tube back into place, put the bolt and carrier back in, recoil spring, and then we can snap the top cover back into place, and we are back and ready to roll. I'll mention a few other identifiable features on the East German rifles. On the bolt and carrier group, on the left-hand side here, we can actually see a triangle proof marking as well as the year, batch number, and serial number of the rifle. You'll notice that the triangle is there on the bolt carrier as well as on the bolt. The bolt also has that Sewell factory marking, which is that diamond with the circle inside. Those are two identifiable features to show if a bolt and carrier is East German manufactured. Many of the parts kits and rifles that came into the country that are East German were actually sanitized on the left side here on the trunnion. The reason for that is many of these guns came out of the Balkans conflict, out of Croatia, and in order to hide their involvement in the conflict, the reunified German government that was supplying arms to the Croatians actually removed the serial numbers off the side of these rifles and reblued them or painted over them. However, they're pretty easily identifiable as East German. Nobody else used this brown plastic furniture, so didn't really hide their involvement, but just enough for plausible deniability, I suppose. The East Germans also marked their rifles and serialized a lot of parts on these guns. So if you are suspecting you have an East German rifle, you'll want to check the trunnion markings if it has been sanitized, and there are serial number markings. There will be a lot of serial number markings. They'll be underneath the gas tube, on the lower handguard, underneath this leaf spring, on the bolt carrier, safety, top cover, recoil spring. They did a lot of markings on these. One last thing to note is the East Germans also issued a unique sling design. They don't have that standard clip that you might see in other AKM variants. It is literally just a thinned sling that just wraps through the sling mounting points. There's no special clips or anything. That's to help with the sound of the rifle when you're running around with it. You'll also notice that the sling mounting points are have bigger loops on them, and that's to accommodate the actual entire sling going through rather than just a clip-on. We hope you enjoyed this look into the East German MPi-KM. If you'd like to see more detailed photos and information, you can visit our website, apexarchives.com. This is probably my favorite variant of the Kalashnikov rifle, so we hope you enjoyed taking a look at it. If you're interested in parts and accessories for your growing firearms collection, I might suggest our sister site, apexgunparts.com. They've got a lot of different parts on their website, and many times in the past they've had East German AK parts. Pretty cool. Thanks guys for watching. Let us know what you think of the East German take on the Kalashnikov down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one.